Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we are going to be cooking from a new to us book called Outlander Kitchen by Teresa Carle-Sanders. If you're not familiar, Outlander is a series of books. Well, the first one was called Outlander, and then there's a very long series of books by Diana Gabaldon, I think is how you pronounce it. I could be very wrong about that. The last name always gets me. And this is the official cookbook. So it's been authorized by the author and everything. She takes food that has been mentioned in the books and has sort of modernized a little bit the recipes, because most of them are from the 1700s, I believe. So they're modernized to be easier to make now with the ingredients we have available, and also to suit our palates better. So we've made one recipe out of this book, not on the channel. My husband made some bread, it was delicious. But this is the first one I am making here for you guys. If you're not familiar with my channel, I'm not gonna give you all of the recipe ingredient measurements, because this is not my recipe, this is her recipe. If you want to make it, you should buy the book. Or sometimes you can find these recipes online, and if so, if I can find it, I will link it in the description below. But let's get cooking. So today we're gonna be making apple fritters, and I saw this recipe and it's fall and apples, and I've just been really wanting these things, and it looked really good, so we decided to make them. And I actually have been listening to the book that this recipe came from, and saw it relatively recently, or heard it relatively recently. This is from The Fiery Cross, which I think is book 5 maybe in the series. And so these are sort of a pancakey donut type thing that we're gonna fry after we put everything together. And it includes whiskey, so I'm real excited about that. She says that these normally would have accompanied a savory meat dish, like especially pork. We're gonna have it sort of as a breakfast donut type thing today, but we're gonna get started because we have to cut up a bunch of apples. Well, not a bunch. We have to cut up some apples and let them marinate for about 30 minutes. So we're gonna get that started. All right, so we're gonna make a mixture of stuff to marinate our apples in. And first we're gonna start with some whiskey. You want to use a blended Scotch whiskey for this. Don't use your best single malt. It doesn't need that. I've got some Dewar's that we happen to have on hand. I did manage to score some Sassenach whiskey, which is from the show Outlander. There's now also a series about that on Starz, if you weren't aware of that. It's great, I love it. And this comes from one of the Starz, but it's very expensive and I'm not using it in this recipe. So got a little bit of blended Scotch whiskey. Some whole milk. She does call for whole milk in this. And I'm gonna keep this around because I'm gonna use it later. Got some lemon juice. I need to measure this because I did not pre-measure it. And if there's not enough, oh well. That'll be about right. All right, that's good. So lemon juice, lemon zest. I used my microplane as usual here for the lemon zest. Just get it off and it gets in small pieces and it's very easy to use. We have some just plain granulated white sugar and some ground ginger, dried ground ginger. Very different flavor than the fresh stuff. I probably wouldn't use fresh stuff in this. And we need some vanilla. I almost always use Mexican vanilla. I like the flavor of it. It's slightly different than other vanilla. There we go. So that's all that goes into this apple marinade. I'm going to mix it up. Got a spoon to mix it up. It's probably going to be loud, so you probably won't see all of this. I just stirred that until I didn't hear much of the sugar grating against the bowl. But now we have to deal with our apples. So you need some firm, sweet apples for this. She suggests Gala, which I think is what these are. Granny Smith, which I think is what this is, although it was supposed to be Golden Delicious. I've cut one up recently, and I'm pretty sure it's Granny Smith. Pink Lady are really great. Honey Crisp would probably be good. You want something that's kind of gonna stand up and not be mushy. So we need to peel, oh that's right, need to peel, core, and cut these into basically a really small 1/2 inch dice. So I'm gonna peel this. I didn't peel it beforehand because they do often get pretty brown, and I just didn't want that to happen. All right, so this has a few brown spots on it. I'm not too worried about that. I'm not gonna bother cutting those off for this particular application because they're gonna be mostly cooked. So I cut it in half, cut it in quarters, and then just slice off the middle core part. Good enough. And so this is how, all of the little bits of skin that I missed. Okay, this is how I cut up these. I make 1/2 inch slices this way. Try to keep it together. And then 1/2 inch slices this way. And then turn it this way. 1/2 inch slices. And then we have our 1/2 inch dice. And I'm just gonna toss them into the marinade as I cut them up. And I'm gonna be peeling and chopping for just a little while here. Okay, I'm done cutting up my apples, and all I'm gonna do is stir these into the marinade, and we're gonna let this sit for 30 minutes before we continue with the recipe. And we're gonna just stir them up every so often to make sure they all get some love from that whiskey mixture. And I'm gonna clean up and prepare for the next step, and we'll see you in just a little bit. My apples have been marinating in this whiskey mixture for about 1/2 an hour. And I've got everything ready to put together the batter for these apple fritters. But the first thing I have to do is strain these apples. So I have my strainer set over this. It won't have nearly as much liquid as this will hold, but it's convenient because it holds my strainer pretty well. So I'm just gonna strain these. Because we're not going to use all of this liquid, but we are going to use some of it. So there we go. So I'm going to put this way so I don't knock all of that lovely stuff off. In the bowl, I have just some all-purpose flour. To that, I'm gonna add, there's some kosher salt, some cinnamon, and some baking powder. Yes, baking powder. Quite a bit. That's gonna provide the lift and make it nice and fluffy and not super dense. So we have that, and we're going to I'm gonna whisk this together. We're gonna use a whisk later, and that'll make it a little bit airy and get out any lumps. Okay. So now we're going to add some eggs. I have had mine sitting out at room temperature, but that is not necessary. Actually, I'm gonna need this bowl, I think. Oh, I dripped all over. That's okay. I'm always messy. So we've got our eggs. We've got some melted butter here. I use some unsalted butter. Probably use salted since it's not that much. It wouldn't be a big difference. And we need just a little bit of this marinade. That's why I kept this out. I just rinsed it. Didn't really wash it since I was mostly using something that it was something that went into here anyway. So there we go. Just a little bit left over. I'm gonna add this. There we go. And we're gonna whisk this together. It's supposed to be a pancake-like batter. I'm not gonna keep whisking because I don't want the gluten to develop anymore in here because we do want it to be light and fluffy. It's not super thin, but before I add any more of the liquid, I'm going to stir in my apples and see where we are. And that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna stir the apples into the batter and try to make sure we get a good distribution of apples. I think that will be perfect. I don't think I want it any thinner than that. The apples added a little bit more moisture, but it's enough to kind of coat the apples. I think that will be perfect. So this is ready to fry. So I've had my oil heating in a deep, I think she says a large saucepan. So that's sort of my largest, not my largest, but that's a decent saucepan. It's a lot of oil. She says 2 to 3 inches, vegetable oil. Any oil you usually fry in that sort of neutral flavored would be absolutely fine. She says over medium-high heat, we're looking for 350 degrees. We'll get everything set up over there so you can watch us fry, and we'll be right back. So I'm waiting for my oil to come up to 350. She says medium-high heat. On my stove, that is usually about where I need to land. About a 7, sometimes a 6.5. I mean, kind of have to knock it back sometimes. But I use this infrared thermometer. Got this from ThermoWorks a while ago. It's got a probe for like meat and stuff, and it's got this infrared, which I use to test the temperature of oil or whatever. I don't like the thermometers that you kind of stick on the side. I've never had much luck with those, but we'll see. This works okay for me. If it works for you, use it. So she says to drop these by tablespoonfuls in here. I don't know if she means like a heaping tablespoon. They look pretty big in the picture. We'll see. I'm gonna start with this small cookie scoop that I have, which is about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. If I want them bigger, I'll go ahead and choose something else, but our first batch, that's what we're gonna try. We're getting there. We're over 300 at least. Turn it up a little bit more just to... I am frying in grapeseed oil. Didn't have quite enough. So I also added a little bit of avocado oil. So I've got like a mixture going. It'll be fine. Those are both pretty neutral oils that can handle high heat and frying pretty well. So All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting some of these in there, and I'll probably have to turn this down after it comes back up to temperature, but make sure you get some apples and just drop it in. We don't want to crowd the pan here, so not too many. I'm gonna go for one more. Now I'm gonna try to keep these turned over. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit. Turn these over as I feel like they need it. Luckily, since these aren't super round, they don't want to flip themselves over, so you can make them cook on the side that you want. That's good. Let's see how I'm doing as far as so a 7 or a 7.5 will probably be good on my stove. We're going for the usual golden brown and delicious here. Little bits, a little burn. She says this should take about 5 minutes for them to be done. I think that one's good. I'm gonna take that one out, which means the rest should be pretty close to done. Have a plate with some paper towels, as you can see, to drain these on. And I don't think you want to eat these while they're super hot. Those apples would be really hot, but warm is probably best. Now she says that you can eat these plain as they are, or sprinkle them with more sugar. I think I'm going to dust some powdered sugar over these. Probably wouldn't be very specific to the, very true to the era that these were originally from, but I think that'll be pretty, so that's what I'm gonna do. So there we go. We have our first batch of apple fritters. I am gonna keep frying these up, and we'll let you know what we think of them in just a minute. On this episode, you watched me make apple fritters from Outlander Kitchen. It's our first one from this book that we filmed for you guys, and I have to say, we really loved it. I was afraid the apples wouldn't be cooked enough. It did take us less time to fry them than she indicated. I think it was more like 3 minutes-ish, so it was kind of quick. Not too much less, but I was a little worried that the apples wouldn't be cooked enough, but they were perfect. A little bit of a bite. The batter was really, really light. It wasn't stodgy. It was a little bit like a pancake batter, like she says, like a funnel cake with apples in it. We really loved them. They were delicious. They were not super hard. You know, chopping up the apples is probably the most difficult thing, and then you have to wait 30 minutes to let them marinate. And you did get that whiskey flavor, the whiskey and the lemon juice in the apples. That was really good. So you got that, and then you just sort of mix everything together. Nothing's really hard, doesn't require a lot of equipment, which, considering the era that these recipes come from, that is to be expected. I don't think they'd have, sous vide machines or food processors or anything like that back then. So, easier recipes. And it's just frying kind of sucks all the time, but it wasn't that bad, honestly. My stove didn't get quite as messy as it usually does when I fry, because I used a deep pot, so that helps. And they fried up pretty quickly. I think we got a few more than she said, but not many. So I think I chose the right size to make these. Most of them were not hard to flip over. Sometimes they got a few got a little too round and hard to keep flipped over. They really wanted to be on one particular side, but those were only a few. Frying always requires a little bit of babysitting, so that part sucks. To me, I don't really love frying at home, but it's worth it if the recipe is really good. And we really like the recipe. We ate almost all of them with our breakfast. I thought they were good for breakfast, kind of like pancakes with some apples on top, except all cooked together and fried. But I would eat them for dessert, and I think without the sugar as a side accompaniment with a nice pork dish, a sort of a fatty meat, that would be really good. So yeah. If you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.